Going, we expect Mary, and what does she, oh, they're right in the this time, and I think it's so loud. Okay.
It is really loud.
Is it me? Usually I don't use it at all. Okay, we're going to do introductions because we have Zoom and one of our members is actually zooming into a train. So we'll start with, introduce yourself, please.
Clay Curtis.
Mary Hunting.
Tony Palisetti.
Hershey Hirschtop Chair and Aaron
Rouse.
There we go. Okay, so, please rise if you are inclined to pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Priority did roll call. Now, order. Okay, I'm going to open up public comment period for anyone who would like to say something that is not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. Now's your chance. Going once, going twice. Paul.
More of a point of order, Paul Steinhauer from Hill Drive.
Excuse me.
There we go. Also.
We can hear you.
There you go.
You think, is there anything to see on your camera? Like, do you think you could turn your camera on possibly or no?
No, it would be.
Videos on.
Yeah.
Then the one.
We can hear you, Paul.
Okay, more of a question.
Sure.
The item that David and I had submitted for a table A revision, it's in the packet, but it's not on the agenda.
Absolutely, that's the discussion.
That's what, okay, just want to make sure that they're there.
Yeah.
That is, you have it covered.
Perfect, thank you.
That cause some of us to look closely at certain sections of the ordinance, specifically section 140-15I and 140-15N2 that describe the purposes of the land use districts. And specifically, we're looking at the purposes of R1 and the industrial districts. This section describes the different districts and the rationale for their creation. 140-15I, the Village Residential District, R1, says to provide areas, and this is a quote from the ordinance, to provide areas of medium to high intensity residential development in locations compatible with existing development in a manner appropriate to the economic provision of community services and utilities. 140-15N2 in the industrial district says to prevent inappropriate juxtaposition of industrial uses and residential. In plain English, this means that large industrial buildings and structures would not be compatible with the R1 residential district, and they should be directed to the industrial zones. We then turned our attention to sections 140, attachment 1, table A, the land use public utilities, which seems to suggest no restriction on public utilities. However, there is additional clarifying language there that says sewer collection and treatment facilities. We interpret that to mean public sewer and septic systems. In order to clarify that table 8 does not give you public utilities free range to develop industrial type facilities in R1 and the R2 district, in opposition to the stated purposes of the districts, we are asking that the amendment to table A, which planning board has before you, be adopted. These details are important. The ordinance is the first and last defense a community has to direct development in a way that's compatible with the wishes of its citizens. I'm going to add a little bit to this. I'm not going to read. I know that Carla pointed out that in the previous planning board meeting that public utility, if they're unhappy with the decision, planning boards can go to the Public Utilities Commission and get an override on the local ordinance. I don't think that's our concern. I think we need to protect our community and write the ordinance so that it best fits our needs and our wishes. If that's appealed, that's another opportunity for the citizens to express their opinion. So I'm asking, and this is all Paul and I here, submitting this together, we're asking that you consider and adopt this ordinance. And we wouldn't mind at all a public hearing, a joint public hearing with the town council to expedite things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Great. Yeah. I was just gonna add that, being familiar with table A, it's great, but it needs work. There's a little bit of ambiguity there. And so for the respect of anyone who has property in R1 and the R2 district, it just makes sense to add a little bit more meat to it so that it's clear and specific, and that'll set us up for less pain in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else on this topic? Anybody else out there in Greenland? Okay,
No
So-
comment, but Tim, can you share your video, please? So the public can see the meeting. So just press start video, please.
It looks like it is being shared, but maybe
I'm seeing it, DeCarlo, on my feed.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
So we're gonna have a discussion about this. And does anybody have anything to turn off?
I understand the intent. I think it's a, worthwhile opportunity, perhaps. You're right, table A does have some shortcomings, and that's something that we've talked about here before, making some adjustments to it. Understand, go ahead and make the change, and then let the chips fall where they may through the legal process if, it gets appealed. Perhaps there's a happy medium there somewhere where we can find ways to minimize these types of endeavors without having to change table A or facing a litigation. Not sure what that is, but perhaps there's an alternative.
I agree.
I think we do need to take a good look at the table. There's a couple of things that I think perhaps need a little bit of better definition. Okay, but for this piece that's on the table, first, I don't disagree about table A, but let's put that aside for a moment and talk about this particular proposed amendment. I mean, is there anything? Come back up, Dave, you can talk to him.
I would just like, excuse me.
Yeah.
David Montgomery again. I would just like to respond a little bit to that. I think part of our purpose in changing this, regardless of any proposal, it's not before us right now, obviously, is that if you clarify that these large, as a public utility structures are not welcome in R1, that might help prevent us ending up in this position again. So the amendment then is a preventive effort for future things that might happen. And I don't see any harm in doing that because companies can come in and propose whatever they want. But they might be steered to the industrial district if they see that it's not really welcome in R1 or R2 for that matter.
So I'm gonna actually stay there for a second, Phil. So here's the problem. Public utilities are allowed in all zones because we have power lines in all zones. And because I can't really tell CMP, I don't know enough, they're not forthcoming enough, I agree with that, to tell us where they need to put their transformers and how big they should be and how that works. And to start carving out pieces of the town, it seems, where they can and cannot go. I mean, nobody's gonna want them, and then we're not gonna have electricity in some funny way. So I am sympathetic. I think it's a terrible place to put it as well. They haven't come back. They haven't been transparent. I agree. I've heard all of that from people. But on the other hand, the PUC will in fact, I think, just overrule you. So I actually have a counter proposal that might help a little bit. The point is you don't want them in residential neighborhoods. Maybe we could put in a buffer or a setback saying that you can't put something of this size within 300 feet of a residence. And that might solve the problem right there, because then it's somewhat universal in town to anywhere in town. It would be in all zones. And it gives you some amount of relief and buffer if it's near a house.
First of all, I think discussing a particular CMP project that it's not on the table anymore is probably counterproductive to this amendment, because we don't know what they're going to do. And if in fact they hadn't bought that property, they might be looking in another district anyway, they're looking at the industrial. So I think to focus on that misses the point. I think the point is that we need to be clear in our ordinance, in the land use, in table A, that it matches up with what we say we just put the districts together for. And right now it doesn't say that. It's confusing, and it says public utilities, sewers basically. It doesn't say you can't provide power places in R1. Obviously, they're going to run lines, and just like the sewer and water people are going to run lines. Those are necessary utilities to serve those districts. Putting a huge infrastructure, industrial type thing in a residential neighborhood, that's not what our ordinance says as a whole. And you have to go back to why you developed those districts. You didn't develop those districts so that you would have that kind of development in R1 and R2. So it's really making the ordinance consistent. And I don't know who's going to come in as a utility and going to put whatever where, but we need to be consistent in our ordinance, make sure that our restrictions and why we created the district match up with what our table says. That's what we're asking in this changing table A. It doesn't say you can't put utilities in to serve the people. It says you can't put a large industrial complex in.
But David, that transformer, or whatever you want to call it, is a public utility. The definition is non-industrial. It is not what is meant by industrial use. It is defined as a public utility. That's what it is. We're not going to change the definition, and that's how the PUC reads it. They read it, and they mean that transformer is a public utility. They do. We can't change that.
I don't know what, I'm not on the main public utilities commission, either are you, so I don't know what they consider a transformer is the appropriate thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me, because you're talking about a specific project. I'm saying make your ordinance consistent. Get rid of the confusion in table A. That implies right now to anybody that looks at it that a public utility come in and do whatever they want in R1 and R2, and we don't care.
Well,
And we don't care because our ordinance says you can do that. And we're asking that to be changed.
Well, I don't think it's fair that we don't care. We do.
But I'm not saying you don't, I'm saying the ordinance says we don't care.
Well,
That's not clear. So let's clarify the ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
And just to add to that, I think going back to what the original intent was for that definition on table A, it just needs clarification. I think the original intent was not to have and it had nothing to do with this specific project. It could be a sewer pumping station. It could be South Berwick Water District. Well, anything. I don't think the intent is to have a large public utility piece of equipment in an R1 or R2 zone, no matter what utility it
So
was.
can I ask those, do you think then that's okay to put it in R3 or R4 or R5? Or B1 or B2?
Well, if you feel so moved, then we'll add that to that too.
But you only want to carve out R1 and R2, and I find that a little bit like it is about this project.
Well, then add the rest of the R's on there.
And then we would have nowhere to put a transfer station down.
That's right.
Industrial zone is
But
where we had it in mind.
Okay, but
That's where it should be. That's the growth, what the growth plan says. Industrial areas is where we want to
except
grow.
I'm under the impression that the line that they need to impact is a line that comes up 236, it's the line that comes down from Liberty and down behind Berwick Academy, and they need to connect to that.
Yeah. I'm not talking about the specific project. I'm talking about the landowners in a residential area. to prevent industrial utility equipment in a residential zone. So remove yourself from this particular project. It's for the good of the whole town, and it restates and clarifies the original intent of what Table A was supposed to be for.
Right.
Okay, just a point, you mentioned now that, this public utilities, sewer, water, the water district, as well as CMP. And you're saying all of that type of activity should be in the industrial zone. Now think about the distances that have to be, piped for new water. Say there's a new development going off on Knights Pond Road. Are you saying that if they have to increase the volume there, the only way to do it is in the industrial zone, put a big pumping station there and blast the water across the town?
I can't entertain what ifs,
No.
unless I see a specific plan. And if Knights Pond is in the R1 or R2, we'd have to take a look at it.
Right.
What's the necessity for
No,
that?
it's in R3, and my point is,
Right.
to just make a blanket statement that all public utilities should be directed to the industrial zone is kind of short-sighted too. So we have to figure out what's a compromise that will get people what they want, i.e. not these large industrial operations within a residential zone, or, at least we can mitigate the impact somehow. But just making a blanket statement that all of it has to go to the industrial zone, that's not practical either.
Well, I think as a byproduct of not having it in R1 or R2 or R3 for that fact, would put it in the industrial zone. But I think what the intent is that if you have some of these green boxes for utilities, for cable, for telephone, for what have you, electrical, CMP, that's expected, that's fine. It's to scale for the neighborhood. And I would be willing that if you had a public hearing and you talked to anyone in the R1 or R2 or, for the heck of it, R3, would they want some kind of large utility in their neighborhood? And you know what the answer is. So we're trying to go back to the original intent, not a NIMBY kind of thing. What's the original intent for that definition in Table A? Or any kind of public utility. If it so is a public utility item that promotes or is required in the industrial zone, so be it. If there's some latitude on any kind of specific what-if project in the industrial zone, then great. There are less restrictions in the industrial zone than we have in R1, R2, and R3. So it depends on the project. So I'm not saying that if there's something that is needed in Aggie to put it out in the industrial zone. That, of course, doesn't make sense. So you've got to take a look at the project and take a look at the plan. But we're trying to go back and restate and clarify what the original intent was.
Well, okay, I'm not sure how you know what the original intent was, unless you were there when Table A was.
Well,
I hold on, I'm under the impression the original intent was that public utilities sort of get a pass and that they're needed all over town, everybody needs electricity. And CMP seems to be the people who would drive where they need their equipment. So and I don't want it next door to me either, Paul. I understand that. I totally get that kind of thing. But on the other hand, I think the intent actually was the way it was projected, and that the PUC can tell them they can put it wherever they want, whether we like it or not. And the best we can do is try to put in some other types of protection, like a buffer or setback or something of that sort, that the PUC can't really affect in order to have some control over where this type of equipment goes.
Obviously, I'm not on board, so if you want to use a different kind of mechanism, that's fine. It just needs some teeth in it. That it can stand up, and if the PUC overturns anything, any other decision that you make in any other district, the PUC can overturn as well. That's
totally true.
Yeah, that's as a matter of fact. That's you do the best you can to protect the residents in town. And if there's a legal matter, there's a legal matter. So
and
Yes.
I'll add one more thing, and then we'll see if Aaron has. Hold on one sec, Aaron. Just so everyone knows, LD 1829, or no, sorry, it wasn't LD 1829. One of the pieces of legislation last year has said that where there is industrial use, which is also considered commercial, now you can have residential use. So our industrial area is actually going to change. And there will be residential, right, so,
This is the last thing I'll say on this, I promise you.
go ahead. Yeah, I'm sure it's not, but that's
But,
okay.
you know, the CMP project keeps coming up with Wadley Lane. And, you know, you say, well, they can say exactly where it goes. Well, it doesn't have to go there. They've admitted it does not have to go there. They have other options that they're going to look at supposedly, although they haven't done any investigations that I can tell. But it's not like that's the only place it can go.
I-
Wait a minute, let me
I
finish.
agree.
Let me finish. So for a utility to come in and say we have to put it here, it's not true. They do not have to put it there. Might cost them a few more bucks, but they can move that site if they want to. So we're just asking, and the amendment's only for R1 and R2. In fact, I think utilities are banned somewhere in R5 or somewhere if I look at the chart again. But, you know, there are other places that are less densely settled that a utility could build in without impacting the intent that you created R1 and R2 for, which is dense residential, not industrial.
I am though under the impression that it has to, it's not, that it has to be along that line.
No.
The line that comes up from
They
Liberty.
have to run some, they could run some additional lines to the industrial zone. That's what their representative told us. But it would be expensive to run those lines from there down to the industrial zone. They can also expand slightly. In fact, they wouldn't have to take it a gas insulated substation, which is very feasible when it's done in residential neighborhoods down on Liberty Street on that site that already exists. So they have options. They don't care to look at them. That's not our problem. We should make our ordinance clear. That's all we're asking.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other discussion? Aaron, sorry about that, Aaron.
No problem. Like you guys, I also have some, I definitely want to see some of these items protected, but I do have some questions about the definitions of transmissions and relays and how that would affect development in our areas. I'm just wondering if we can get anyone, if we were to discuss this, someone who has some actual technical knowledge to help walk us through ways that we could do this in order to, so we're not just stabbing things in the block, in the dark and trying to figure things out.
I agree with you, Aaron. I think that's a great idea. So I guess we could ask CMP to come back and have a chat, though that would be particular to just the substation that they've been contemplating. Or maybe we could find someone with some other expertise that is sort of a neutral party. So I'm going to suggest we stop here on this discussion and try to gather more information and keep it on the agenda as old business for the next meeting in a couple of weeks. All right? Is that cool? Everybody good with that? Okay, great. We're going to go on to accessory dwelling units. So, and this is a discussion also. So if anyone would like to speak to it, please approach. All right, I'm here for that.
Hi, Kirk Estes, is 15B Vine Street. I already addressed the town council a couple of weeks ago, and it's just respective to 140-46-1, section A, where it says the accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 750 square feet, where the state of Maine is allowing to have multiple units on property. In the example of our property, we could have 2 additional units in additional residence, because we're just under an acre, if I interpret the law correctly. Rather than doing that, what we're proposing is increasing the size from 750 to something more realistic, like 1,100, 1,200 square feet, so you could have 2 bedrooms. Our intent is, our son is currently working in Portsmouth, living with us. We'd like to have him have affordable housing nearby, so basically with us. And also have the possibility of potential retirement income, from the property down the road. And the 1 bedroom, it just makes it challenging to meet those needs. So we would rather, we certainly do not have any intent of putting multiple units on the property. But if we were going to put one, we prefer it to be slightly larger. The other thing that I want to make reference to was, gentleman and Packet Mike McGinnis added a nice comment that's in your packet, about, from an investor's perspective, you can reference that for the other reason, talking to you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in again. I appreciate that. I'm assuming you've read the next letter as well, so, we will now discuss it.
I don't have any negative thoughts on it at all. I think it makes economic sense. This was laid out here, from a perspective of, allowing exactly these type of situations, not just individuals who won't come in and rent a, one bedroom apartment, but somebody who wants to start a family up and, so a couple of bedrooms would be important in that regard. I don't know that changing from 750 to 1,200 or 1,100 square feet is a significant impact in terms of the footprint on the property, but it just gives a lot more flexibility to, what you can use that dwelling for. So I'd be in favor of it. I'm guessing procedurally we'd have to go through the whole, public hearing and question amendment to the ordinance, et cetera. But I'd be in favor of it generally.
I would also be in favor of that. I think I mentioned this before, just working with so many different people. A lot of people are looking for homes that they can also set up for their aging parents. So think of your parents moving probably from a bigger house to just a 1-bedroom. It works, but if you have a bigger family, having a guest room for a sibling to stay with that parent or a caregiver even, you need a little bit bigger space, and that's not a huge impact. The 1,200 square feet, I'd also be in favor of it.
And I think I would also, because the original ADU concept was that it was for a parent or something like that, that, the kids would take over the main house, the parent would be there. But now the emphasis is more partly on workforce housing, so we have rentals possibility. Also, even with the parent moving out back, if it's 2 parents moving out back, 750 starts getting pretty crowded. And I think that it's not unreasonable. So I think it is something that we could look into.
Aaron.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If you look at some of and I think it also won't have as big of an impact on the houses there. I mean, if you look at a lot of the houses in New England, there have been people building additions on there for 400 years. I think that if it makes economic sense and that helps a struggling housing market, we should definitely look into it.
So I probably more than anyone here have struggled with this, and I tried to really separate out sort of philosophically what an ADU is meant for, because it's not my job to tell people who get to live there and how. Like whether it's for your parents, whether it's because you're going to move there, whether it's because your son is going to move there, whether you're going to rent it out. To me, that is not sort of a zoning issue, right? And in fact, when I moved here, I remember the ordinance had that only a relative could move in, and I was sort of appalled by that. That sounded so blatantly illegal and discriminatory to me. So I'm trying to separate out like all that, not that I'm not sympathetic. Nobody wants their kid living in their basement forever, and we know we have a housing crisis and need more housing. But I also struggle then with, if we're getting to the point where you're just building a second home, I'm not really sure why we have a distinction between what's an ADU and what is just another house. My house, I lived in a house that's 1,200 square feet. That's a house. That's not an ADU. And also, if it's an ADU, I believe your parking requirements are no longer in play. So I'm a little worried about what happens if we call it an ADU, we make it the size of a house, but you don't have to provide any parking. And in most of the town, that won't matter, but it will matter downtown because people will have to self-select as to who gets to live there, because we don't have on-street parking. So it just sort of complicates this discussion. It's not quite as simple as saying, let's just increase the size of it. I do housing. 650 is a pretty comfortable, nice looking 1-bedroom. 850 is a really comfortable 2-bedroom. I was willing to push myself to 1,000. 1,200 is sort of pushing it to being a real house at that point. So I'm not sure what to do with that. I'm just trying to sort out what should we do here, and also really don't forget zoning is about its impact on everybody around you. And so we're not talking about it's above the garage, it's attached to the house as an in-law apartment, it's maybe a second apartment with your basement. Now you're putting basically a house in your backyard, and you would still have to meet setbacks, I assume, and density requirements and FAR and lot cut, all sorts of other things. So I'm not exactly sure where to go from here about this. And I'm wondering if I can ask DiCarlo. Oh, DiCarlo has his hand raised. Please weigh in, DiCarlo.
So what I'll say about this is with the majority of the board has expressed interest in changing your requirements upwards for ADUs. I would honestly, you guys are a decision-making body. And so I would, discuss the number and see if you can come to a majority agreement on the number, and then request staff to draft an amendment for that number. And then you can go into the discussion. You can start going either into another workshop, or after that's drafted and presented to you, you can schedule, a public hearing or whatever have you. But I do think now that you guys are coming to the point where the majority of the board is seeking to amend that number, you start talking about the number itself, and coming to a point where you can agree on a number to change it to, because that's where you're going to have to end up at the end of the day. It's great points all around. Hershey, I definitely understand. When you come to a bigger scale, it does start to have another impact on your neighbors. You can't have unlimited. It's not something that you can say, hey, ADUs can be up to 2,000 square feet, and not expect it to start impacting the neighborhood and the neighboring properties, especially since it's an accessory. It is classified as an accessory structure, an ADU is. And so now I think you guys just go directly into that conversation, and then we would need some type of formal vote that would direct us to draft an amendment, and with that number included, because as a board, you make decisions by vote. And so it's a clear signal to administration on what you would like going forward. One other thing I'll say about this, because we're talking about a lot of land use changes, I do want to remind you all that there was discussion about having a joint meeting with the council on land use changes to see where their thoughts are going to be, because you are the first board, but then any changes then are forwarded to the council, and you want to kind of be in line between the two. And so I would say either for this one, just choose a number and start the process, or you can say, okay, this is one of the items we want to talk to the council about, and see where their thoughts are, and see where they will be willing to go with this as well. But it's going to be your choice. And if you have any other questions, I'm here to help.
I have one follow-up, and then Aaron wanted to say something, and then Alan. So hold on one sec. My question is, how do we distinguish between it being an ADU and a house and having a parking requirement?
So state law says you cannot, you will not have a parking requirement for anything as an ADU, classified as an ADU. So if it's classified as an ADU, by state law, it is not required to have a parking space. That's just how law is. You can restrict the dimensional requirements that's having with the ADU, such as footprint. Right now, you're saying you're governing interior space, right, and not footprint. And so this is also why we started having the conversation about footprints when we're talking about 1829 and 2173. It's because if you're thinking about the neighbor, then you might want to be thinking about distances and footprints. You can't really it can't be more restrictive than the single family dwelling that's on the lot. So the most you can do is say that it has to, an ADU must abide by the setbacks of the single family dwelling. That's also the principal structure on a lot. You can do that. But you can't go more restrictive for the ADU. Did that answer the question?
Well, yes and no. And this really only is downtown because that's where I think parking is an issue, but it feels like there's a way that you just dodge calling it a house where you're allowed multiple houses on your lot. And you classify it as an ADU, even though the ADU might be bigger than you putting a little cape on your property, and now there's no parking requirement. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely hear what you're saying, but as a state law, they don't want to classify this way. This is one of the issues about the state legislation. It's in areas that are like downtown areas when you don't have a lot of space. You can have it to be like a certain amount of distance away from the principal structure, but other than that, the state has said hands off. You have to treat it like it's an accessory structure, so you don't really have a lot of control over it.
Alan.
I'll add something to your.
Hold on a second. Aaron.
Can I just hop in here real quick? I'd just like to make a suggestion that we look at this and just try to keep it to minimal, say 1,000 feet, keep the dimensional setbacks for ADUs as that we would apply to anything else, so it's not encroaching on the neighbors. And then as far as the parking issue, let the market decide. If someone's going to build a rental in downtown, they're going to need parking. If someone's moving their elderly parents who can't drive anymore, parking's not going to be an issue for that family. Let the market kind of determine that part, and but at least keep our increase of size to a minimal, make it marketable now so it can work for people, but not go to the highest extreme of 1,200. And see how the chips land. If we need to adjust again, we can.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. Alan.
I just wanted to comment. You asked how we classify an ADU. How do we say this is an ADU? When they come to me to ask for a building permit, usually they're going to put in a garage with a second story. The first question comes out of my mouth is, are you going to have a dwelling above the garage? If they say yes, it's an ADU. I'm going to permit it as an ADU. If it's permitted as an ADU, it can never be split from that parcel. I always encourage people, if you're going to put that there, think about it in a way that you might be able to split it off down the road with road frontage and all the minimum requirements, so that if you in the future want to split it, you can. Don't lock yourself in. This is an ADU and it can only be transferred with this parcel. So that's one comment.
So then, let me ask this. So you have a house, and maybe you're in a 2-acre zone, let's say R3, right? And you decide to put in an ADU, and you have enough room, and you meet the setbacks, and you put in a separate building with a kitchen, which is what usually makes something a dwelling unit, right? You have to have an operating kitchen, otherwise it's just a garage or something else. And what makes that an ADU as opposed to a house?
Because they're coming to me with a parcel, yes, and they have a primary dwelling on it.
Okay.
If they're putting another dwelling, I'm going to classify it as an ADU. This is an ADU on this parcel. It's going to say that on the building permit. That's what they're being permitted for, period.
Okay.
Is there any practical difference? I mean, if you were, for instance, that ADU, you mentioned you might want to split it down the line. Well, so they come along and they say, okay, we're splitting into 2 parcels now. What's the difference now? Is that ADU is the only difference between it and the house, that it's legally part of the original property?
Well, if they don't have the road frontage, they can't put a second dwelling there. But they can put an ADU without the road frontage. So you can do an ADU where you can't put 2 primary dwellings on it unless you meet all the minimum requirements for a law.
But if they did meet that, so for instance, if they were to put a 100-foot driveway down to the ADU, giving it enough frontage between now or 2 lots, that would then be So it would then be able to be a separate house.
They could do that, as long as it's within subdivision rules. They have to wait 5 years, depending on how many lots they create. They can't create more than 2 lots, or it's a subdivision, and they have to go through subdivision approval. But those are all possibilities. They could do that possibly if they wanted to go through that process, and they could split that off if they had all the minimum requirements.
And as confusing as this is, I believe I was told by, I don't remember who, I'm so sorry, but, that you couldn't condoize your ADU, but that's about to change as well. And then now you can, just, I assume, well, maybe even if it isn't separate, you can condoize an ADU built on your property. Does that sound?
I'm unfamiliar with condo
Okay.
rules, so
Okay.
DeCarlo may be more familiar.
I think that was in the last, like, bunch of legislation. There was something contemplating this idea that you could build an ADU and it would be a separate legal entity on your land, just like other subdivisions. So that is just another little thing to remember. Unless we have something really different to discuss, I'm comfortable with 1,000 square feet.
I want to bring up one point before we talk about
please.
numbers. Yeah.
Please, yeah.
So you could also, there are towns that say a percentage of the primary dwelling, and that's a possibility as well. When they do that, there's some drawbacks for that. If you have a massive house, 6,000 square foot house, you can build a 3,000 square foot, if it's 50% of that size, you can build a huge one. But you could also put caps on that. An ADU couldn't exceed. I do have a problem when numbers are arbitrary and you've just decided what those numbers are. That seems unfortunate for some people, and it's always going to be unfortunate for some people. But what are you basing the size on? Is there some kind of science you're using, or some kind of data that you're saying this is the size because of this reason? You could, so one disadvantage is those larger houses, and your ADU would be very large, bigger than my house. Much bigger.
Almost everything's bigger than yours.
But people with a very small house are at a disadvantage as well. If they live in an 800 square foot house, their ADU can only be 400 square feet. You could put a minimum in there. It has to be this or larger for an ADU. You could do that if you wanted. So there are some options other than numbers.
Well, and when we went through the numbers originally, we did look at, I think I could into several towns. I think Elliott had sort of this graduated percentage thing, and I don't remember where we're at, but I think the problem was that, like, there's a Cape down the street from me that I swear is probably 500 to 600 square feet. And if we put a percentage on it, it would be able to build a 200 square foot ADU. Or it would have to build a house the same size, and now you're building a house that doesn't feel accessory, and you want it to look and feel accessory, which is part of the problem. And though I agree, the number seems a little bit like, okay, let's just pick a nice, metric number. There is the fact that there is sort of standard, apartment sizes out there for 2 or 3 bedroom apartments. And at least for affordable housing, a 1,200 square foot apartment is generally a very comfortable, nice 3 bedroom, not huge bedrooms, but a 3 bedroom. 650 is a 1 bedroom, 7 or 850 is a 2 bedroom, and I don't think we're trying to create 3 bedroom starter homes. I think that's a whole different ball of wax, and life is a compromise. So to me, 1,000 square feet is pretty darn good. That's a pretty good 2 bedroom with even extra space, maybe 2 bathrooms.
And as a code officer, the simpler the calculation, the better. If you say 1,000 feet, that's really simple.
I hear you.
I can do 50% of a house. I can do that pretty easy too.
Then you don't have to worry about the woodshed attached to the house and part of the house.
I'd just like to say, in agreement with Aaron and with you, Hershey, I think 1,000, in terms of data, according to the information that was submitted, it said that an average, apartment in York is 1,000 to 1,200. So, I mean, I think we're in the range. I'd be comfortable requesting 1,000.
All right, I appreciate that. Barry, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably like to see it more at 1,000 to 1,100, but.
I'm also, in the absence of more information about, total statistics, 1,000 to me sounds good.
All right. Okay, so I think we have at least, this is not immutable. We will have more discussion. Our next step would be DiCarlo gave us all that information, a workshop or a public hearing to be held. I think, the town council would like to do, why don't we set a town council planning board workshop?
We need to vote on.
Pick a number.
1,000.
Pick and vote on number.
Do we at this moment have to pick a number?
You can pick a number to move forward to the council and make a suggestion.
I will entertain any motion.
Move that we go forward with 1,000 square foot footprint for ADUs.
Okay. 1,000 square feet total. Yes.
I will second that in the interest of moving things forward.
All right. And we have an opportunity to change this again because we don't have an amendment written and we're gonna have to go through that. So just so everybody knows.
And it could also change as the result of the workshop.
That's true. So, okay, so let's, we'll take a vote. Clay.
Aye.
Mary.
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Aaron, you good?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we will send this on to town council and suggest a workshop. We have to do a date with them now, or can we?
We do.
Okay, so,
Something help us out here because I suck at this part.
All right.
Okay.
all right, so you do not have, sorry, you do not have to do a workshop with the council. I brought that up as an option because I know that there was previous discussion about doing a joint workshop to go over basically all the legislation you were thinking, so you can get their feedback on something and you're not going down, a rabbit hole that something that they're not going to support. If you feel pretty comfortable with the legislation as it is, you can just request staff to draft the amendment and you can go directly into scheduling a public hearing after seeing the draft. So that is going to be your decision on which way you guys would like to go. You just need to make a decision of which way you want to go, process-wise, and then we'll make it happen.
Okay, if folks are sort of comfortable not having further discussion, Mary, you can do a take back if you want. I'm going to suggest we go ahead to draft the legislation, and once again, we will have an opportunity to talk about it because I don't think the town council is really going to. I think they'll support us in this. That's my guess. Does that sound? Yes. So all right. So thank you, DiCarlo. I appreciate that. Why don't we send that out to the attorney or whoever's going to draft an amendment to the ordinance, and then we'll come back to that and schedule a hearing at some point and then go forward.
And you need to vote.
We did just vote. Did
We-
we just vote on
You
that?
vote all together? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
5-0.
Sorry,
We're good.
getting lost.
Thank you. No, it's okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Good. Okay. You're gonna hang in there with us, right? I appreciate that.
And I will say, to your comment, Elliot is, percentage of the living space that you have.
They are.
Neighborhoods.
Well, it's interesting in that you're supposed to think of it as an accessory use, hence the name. But I also found out from another planner that he told me this whole idea of an accessory dwelling unit was a bit of a dodge in that people wanted to build compounds or other houses and yet you weren't allowed to. So instead of saying I'm going to build a second home or another home or a house for my kid, which was typical of New England farms, right, years ago in a different society and world, they called them ADUs and made them smaller. And so you've got this whole mentality going, but since I found that out, I have a different feeling about ADUs. So I'm okay with that. Because that annoyed me too. All right. We have other people who've been waiting very patiently. Jill, are you going to come up, or Scott? Who's going to speak to we're on to landing trails. I don't think we're going to have a long discussion, but come on up, Scott. I know.
Scott Landis, Academy Street, and I'm speaking on behalf of a group of citizens who are working with the Greater Berks Regional Land Trust to design and develop the landing trail, which you all are familiar with because it's come before you. And the planning board has approved the inclusion of the landing trail within the town revitalization plan. It's been passed to the town council and they've done the same. What we're looking for at this point, and this is we're following really the guidance that DiCarlo has provided for us about the legal process. What we're looking for at this point is
an amendment to the town ordinance that would allow for a public walking and hiking trail within the shoreland protection area. The 100-foot designation within 100 feet of the river. My understanding is, again, coming from DiCarlo, is that the language for this amendment needs to be drafted and then approved by the town council. And then once it's approved, it goes to the town approved by the planning board, and it needs to go to the town council for their approval or amendment along the way. So that's basically where.
So, and my only question is, this is only particular to the revitalization plan. So it's very specific to this area that's already designated, correct?
My understanding is that it has to be that this kind of project, this project has to be approved within the town revitalization plan.
And I think that Carlo explained it, but I just want to make it clear to everyone, it's not expansive. For example, if I wanted to put in a walking trail and I had property along the Salmon Falls River, I could not just do that myself.
Yeah, I think 2 points here. One is that if your property would presumably not be included within the town, as revitalizing as it may feel to you. And the other point is that this is for a public walking and hiking trail. So if you're a private property, it's not a public property for hiking.
Great. Any questions?
I do have one question, and that is that for a use such as this, presumably the approval includes some sort of agreement for maintenance. I see cantilevered walkway. I worry about how it will be kept up.
Well, I guess you could apply that even to a trail, to a walking trail. So it would really apply to anything on the trail. I don't know that having specific language about the maintenance of that trail.
Okay.
You can have.
I'll jump in here. So this is actually, and so Clay, I definitely understand your hey, maintenance of the trail and what have you. That's a separate conversation on the application itself that will be coming before you, and you can require that maintenance be done when the application comes before you. This is the exception just for it to be possible to even make it, to make any structures within the 100 feet of a resource protection. And so if this application came before you today, not talking about the law change, but just the application, today you would have to say, no, you're not allowed to do this because the exemption to allow this doesn't exist. And so this is why they're coming before you asking today about drafting language about the exemption, so it could be possible for them to put an application in, period. So absent of any type of exemption, you can't put any structures within 100 foot. And one of the reasons why they're requesting the town attorney to draft this in particular is that the exemption exists in state law, but it does not exist in Chapter 1000. Chapter 1000 hasn't been updated, which is the state rules regarding resource protection. And so you really do need an attorney to draft that exemption to make sure that it's going to be consistent with the state law. And so you're adopting the correct thing in your shoreland provisions.
Clear, thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Not a question, just a comment. In general, I don't see an issue with putting this forward to the attorneys to request, possibility of a waiver. But I do think as we get further along in the conversation, should we get there and you guys come forward with a full plan on this, the difference between a walking trail and these cantilever bridges / walkways, I think there is enough of a distinction in there that we would, to Clay's point, be looking at some maintenance issues. So I just put that out there, but that's what I'm
Understood. And it just means we're going to be back here 2-3 times.
Oh, yeah.
4 times.
Yeah, bird.
It's a different place. This is.
No, I know, but I'm wondering if we can.
Gonna do what?
A bird blind.
Can we have it here? This land?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
and while I've got the Carl here, is there some reason, some of these, so Salmon Falls, right, the one on Holdfields Road,
tidal waters, yeah.
right, there was also some concern that things were in the resource protection or permit.
So Great Works, that's a separate project.
Right.
Great Works is working on revising that plan based on 100-foot setbacks.
But I'm wondering if we are allowed an exemption, why we wouldn't
The
get.
exemption for this is only because it's included in the downtown revitalization. Does not, it will not extend to anything other than,
Okay.
which is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
I hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a way that this trail can be accessible for people walking from town
I got you.
and using it from town.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
You really want my bird.
Okay, thank you. I
right.
think, we need a motion for this one, we do, right? To move this along to ask the attorney to draft the amendment, yeah?
Yes.
Wait, can motion. We don't.
Can I just say I so move instead
Yes.
of trying to restate
That's
it?
fine,
Okay.
fine by me.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Clay,
Aye.
Barry,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
I vote aye, and Aaron?
Aye.
Great, thank you. 5-0, we will get that up for hopefully maybe the next meeting.
Quick
Oh,
question.
yeah.
So the planning board can request it. It doesn't have to be from the town council, correct?
The town council has to basically approve the ordinance. We
No,
can
no,
recommend.
to request the attorney to draft.
No, we can request that.
Okay.
We will, we do the whole thing of
Yes.
getting the ordinance where we want it, then we send it to town council for their approval. Thing.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. We have one bit of old business, which is we need to have scheduled a public hearing. It needs a 30-day advance plus some notice. To streamline this process, we are going to do it jointly with the town council. So I am suggesting May 12th. If you look at the planning for change, I think the town council public hearing is on the schedule for that. Things got a little wonky on the schedule, a little bit off.
Thank you.
Wait, not May 12th.
That's not 30 days.
No, that's not 30 days.
Oh, sorry, did I get that wrong?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah, look,
June 16th, that's what we said, right? Oops, sorry, you're right.
correct.
June 16th, that's mine, sorry. I had it.
That's 30 days.
That's
plus.
30 days plus, right. Yes, June 16th. Is that cool? And we need to vote on that, so I will have a motion to set a public hearing, a joint public hearing with town council. I did talk to John James, I don't think he needed the date, but that's the date it sort of has to be, so. Yeah. To keep this moving along before July 1st.
So the motion that we coordinate with town council for a joint public hearing on
Comp plan.
comp plan for June 16th.
Perfect, thank you.
And second it.
Wait, well, I would amend that, the motion was to coordinate, not, but you need to have a public hearing.
Yeah, my comment was to coordinate with them to set the public hearing.
Just to say we're gonna have a public.
Yeah, we're gonna have a public hearing.
Okay, great. Second. Great. Okay, great. Clay,
Aye.
Mary, Tony,
Aye.
Hershey says aye, Aaron. Unmute Aaron.
Aye.
Excellent, all right. Thank you, that, I will, Ellen, do you want to talk to John about this? Or do you?
I will, I'm gonna give that to Jen.
You are,
Yeah.
and then, great, I appreciate that coordination. Great, so, board member comments, anything anybody wants to discuss, because I have one thing.
No.
Clay? No? Great, I'm gonna make a suggestion here, we've worked really hard on the comp plan amendment at our growth area. It's clear that the town is a lot of people are very interested in protecting R4 and R5. And there are a variety of ways we can do that. And Carl and I have had some discussions around some other amendments that we might want to put in place and put in place first sooner rather than later. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll say one might be that we don't allow a waiver for the 600-foot road requirement in R4 and R5. In other words, we can't give anybody a waiver to have a longer road, and that would basically discourage some suburban sprawl in those areas that we don't want to see. So that's one of them. Also, remember the cluster development he showed us where it's 20% of land it's going to be that in this little circle he had. Maybe putting forth that as an amendment also would be good. So some of this has already, I think, gone on to I don't know what the other ones were. Carl, what were the other two? Hold on, sorry. I had it up on my screen and then I lost it.
So this is a part of this discussion that you guys have already been having, a part of 1829, about keeping the rural area more rural in scope. So it was that waiver that you can give for the 600 feet for subdivision for a dead end road. Making sure that that's going to be inputted into your zoning ordinance as well, not only your subdivision ordinance. Because basically what can happen right now is that someone can make a road today and they won't be subject to the 600-foot limitation. And then if they come in for subdivision, the road's already made. So that's number one. Number two was the radius of development in the rural areas. And so that ensures that basically the 20% instead of the cluster development, which is more variable in scope, like you guys have already reviewed. And I'm not remembering the third one, but what I've already asked the attorney to do is basically the full draft is basically done for 1829. And so done in a sense of for you all to start looking at, not done in the sense that it's ready to adopt. I just want to be very, very clear about that, is that it is not ready to adopt, but it is ready for you guys to start reacting to it and changing things and having these discussions about what you want to adopt and what you don't want to adopt. And the last portion, and it was three things, is about lot sizes in the R4 and R5. You need to start discussing minimum lot sizes. Right now, minimum lot sizes in R3, R4, and R5 are about 3 acres. They're all the same in all of those zones. And so you need to start having that discussion about lot sizes and what is the actual minimum lot sizes that you guys would want to have.
Right. Thank you, DeCarlo. And also I have a few other notes. One was whether we should have a discussion about maximum building size. And once again, I have a lot of ambivalence. I'd love to hear what people think about it. On one hand, if you live in the middle of nowhere, I don't really care. On the other hand, if you put in a big subdivision and you build these huge houses, we get less housing. And so I care about that. So that's just something to sort of throw out there for now. And also the other thing we needed worked on was the fact that our ordinance currently allows multifamily housing to only have 6 dwelling units in a building. And if we're expecting more density and we want to stay true to 1829, we need to change that. Because you can't really build density when you can only put 6 units in a building. That is a real limitation and a real stop on building things. And that definitely doesn't pencil out. I know that anymore. So anyway, just throwing those things out there. DeCarlo's already on it. I'm sure Alan is going to follow up on it as well. And that's it. Does anybody, Aaron, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. Safe travels home, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.